I still remember the smell. Even now, I catch a whiff of it in my dreams. Something rotten and old, like books left to rot in a damp cellar. It clung to me the moment I walked through the door of that miserable, forsaken house. It was supposed to be my salvation. That's what I told myself as I unpacked the few things I'd brought with me. A typewriter, my battered old suitcase, and the stack of unfinished manuscripts. I'd been suffering from writer's block for nearly a year, ever since my last novel had bombed and left me creatively paralyzed. My agent's idea was a retreat, far away from the distractions of New York. Just go somewhere quiet and write, she'd said. Simple as that. The house itself was in a remote village in Maine, somewhere I'd never even heard of before. It was old, much older than I'd imagined from the photographs. There were 3 floors, but I quickly realized I'd only be using the ground floor. The upper levels had been abandoned long ago, judging by the dust and boarded-up windows. My first night was quiet. Too quiet. The silence there was thick and unnatural. I kept hearing little sounds, tiny scratches and creaks, though I chalked it up to settling beams or stray animals. But as I lay in bed, trying to calm the unease brewing in my gut, something brushed against my hand, a slight, cold caress. I bolted up, heart pounding, but I was alone. Just a breeze, I thought. Just a damn breeze. The next morning, I explored the village. The locals eyed me with a mix of suspicion and pity, whispering among themselves as I passed. A lanky, bearded man at the general store was the only one who'd speak to me directly.
So you're staying at the old Braithwaite place, are you?
The villager muttered, his voice low, eyes darting as if making sure no one else was listening. He leaned closer and I caught a whiff of stale tobacco and something earthy, like he'd just come from working the fields.
Didn't realize anyone want to stay there, especially not after what happened. Braithwaite was a strange sort, always talking about voices, about messages he was receiving from somewhere he called the Hollow. Folks thought he was just a lonely old man, maybe a bit touched in the head. But then he stopped coming to town altogether, stopped talking to anyone.
I tried to brush it off, but something about the way he said the Hollow gave me chills. What happened to him? I asked. The villager's mouth tightened, his hands wringing a worn cloth.
Nobody's rightly sure. One day, he just vanished. Some folks say he was taken by whatever he claimed was haunting that house. Others think he just wandered into the woods and never came back. But the strange thing is, after he disappeared, people started hearing noises coming from the house, whispers.
I scoffed, trying to play it off, but he raised a finger, eyes narrowing.
It's no joke. That house takes something from you. So whatever you're planning to do there, I'd think twice before poking around. There are secrets in that place that don't want to be uncovered.
I laughed it off then, but as I left, I saw him make a peculiar gesture, a twisting of his fingers that felt oddly ritualistic. The house seemed colder when I returned, and a faint odor of sulfur seemed to linger in the halls. The air was thick with something I couldn't name, something oppressive and alive, pressing on my lungs. Days blurred into nights. I wrote feverishly, but my words felt hollow, each draft more lifeless than the last. Frustration twisted in me, making me reckless. I began roaming the house at night, carrying an old lantern I'd found in the basement. That's when I first heard the whispering. Faint, almost too low to notice, but unmistakably there. I thought it was the wind, but there was a rhythm to it, a cadence almost like a chant. Sometimes I would catch words, twisted phrases that slid under my skin like shards of ice. They felt like secrets meant for someone else, yet they carved themselves into my brain, lingering long after the echoes died down. One night, as I was drifting into a fitful sleep, I felt a presence beside me. My eyes shot open and I saw no one. but the sensation was unmistakable, like a cold weight pressing down on the mattress, dipping it ever so slightly. I bolted out of bed, heart thundering, but nothing moved. My breath came in ragged gasps, and yet, a voice brushed against my ear, soft and broken.
"Help me."
The whisper seeped into me, sending shivers down my spine. I wanted to leave, to run out into the night and forget that place forever. But something compelled me to stay, a strange curiosity or maybe a morbid fascination. What if the voice was real? What if it was a piece of my own fractured mind, lost somewhere in that dark, hollow space? Against my better judgment, I ventured to the upper floors. The second story was pitch black, the boards creaking underfoot as though they might collapse at any moment. And then, at the far end of the corridor, I saw it. A faint glimmer of light spilling out from a half-open door. I felt compelled to enter, as if some invisible hand were pulling me. Inside, the room was empty save for a single old chair facing a cracked mirror on the opposite wall. And in that mirror, for just a fleeting moment, I saw a face. A young man, pale and gaunt, with eyes that screamed of some unimaginable terror. It was him, Braithwaite. I knew it instinctively. He looked at me with pleading eyes, as though desperate to speak, to reveal some terrible truth. But as I reached out, the mirror shattered and the light vanished. I stumbled back in horror, but I could still feel his presence lingering. And then I heard his voice, low, desperate, pleading. "Finish it." That night I began writing, almost as if possessed. The words flowed, frantic and fevered. They weren't my own, yet I couldn't stop. Hours passed, the lines twisting and turning, revealing a story I hadn't known was inside me. A story about a man driven mad by whispers, a man trapped in a hollow place, unable to escape the torment of his own mind. The typewriter clacked beneath my fingers with a rhythm that felt foreign, as if the keys had a mind of their own. The words spilled onto the page in frenzied lines, a story weaving itself without my control. Each sentence felt heavier, as though the machine was siphoning something from me with every word. I couldn't stop. My hands moved on their own, guided by some unseen force, my eyes transfixed as the story unfolded in a language almost unrecognizable. A chill wrapped around my spine, making each breath feel labored, as if the air in the room were thickening. I could feel it now, the house watching me. It wasn't just in the walls or the whispering shadows. It was something deeper, rooted, an ancient hunger pulsing beneath the floorboards under my feet, coiled and waiting. I wanted to scream, to tear myself from the desk and flee, but I was glued to my chair. My fingers burned against the keys, like they were fused to the metal. The words on the page grew darker, the ink spreading and twisting, spelling out something more than just a story. I squinted in horror as a phrase slowly scrawled itself across the paper. "Welcome to the Hollow." And then, in the dead silence, I heard it. A low, hollow laugh. It was a sound that came from everywhere and nowhere, filling the room like smoke, slipping into my ears and coiling around my thoughts. It was Braithwaite, or whatever was left of him, delighting in my fear, in my helplessness. The door slammed shut behind me, and the room filled with a suffocating darkness, swallowing the light from the lamp beside me. My breath came out in short, panicked gasps as I felt something shift in the air, a presence closing in, pressing against my skin like icy fingertips. In the quiet, the typewriter started typing on its own. Each keystroke echoed through the room louder and louder, filling my ears until the words on the page screamed into my mind. "You were never meant to leave." Then, in the dead silence of early dawn, I heard it again. A voice that wasn't mine, whispering the final line of the story. "It's not over." I stopped typing, frozen. The manuscript on the desk seemed to pulse with a life of its own, almost as if it were breathing. And then, slowly, the pages began to turn on their own, one by one, revealing new words, new phrases, new horrors. As I sit here, fingers trembling over the typewriter keys, The shadows around me deepen, closing in like a thick, inky fog. The pages piled beside me are no longer blank. They're filled with words I barely remember writing. Braithwaite's words, stories of a place darker than any nightmare, a place he called the Hollow. And now, as the final sentence forms on the page before me, I hear it, a soft, chilling whisper that rises from the shadows behind him, so close, it feels like ice on my neck.
Welcome home.
It was then I understood. Braithwaite hadn't left this place. He'd never been able to leave. The house had consumed him just as it was consuming me. It fed on our fear, our desperation, twisting our own minds against us, imprisoning us within our own nightmares. I tried to flee, but the door wouldn't open. The windows were barred, the shadows closing in, suffocating me. As I type these final words, I can feel it again, his cold presence beside me, watching, waiting. This isn't a warning, it's a confession. If you're reading this, know that I'm already gone, trapped in a place where nightmares never end, another soul caught in the hollow.